everybody to today's talk on fighting for social Europe when Europe is at war, a conversation with Philippe van Parijs. Welcome. I'm Stefanos Gandolfo. I'm the director of the Columbia Global Center in Athens, which is Columbia University's newest addition to its network of teaching and research hubs around the world. As a philosopher myself, I am particularly delighted to be in conversation with one of the leading thinkers of our times, Philippe, who has challenged and advanced our comprehension on a wide array of issues. Philippe is emeritus professor at the University of Louvain and has taught over many decades, spanning his career at universities including Oxford and Harvard. He holds not one, but two doctorates, one in philosophy from Oxford and one in social sciences from the University of Louvain. In July 2020, the British magazine Prospect selected him among the world's top 10 thinkers for the COVID-19 age because of his role as the godfather of the basic income movement, something which I hope we will get a chance to hear more about today. He has written multiple books on a wide range of issues, from political economy to democracy and linguistic justice. Today, we welcome him at the Delphi Economic Forum to discuss what a social Europe is or can be at a time of uncertainty, with increased military spending and the possibility of war being much higher than ever before, certainly during my lifetime, and I see probably the lifetime of many of our audience here today. So, Philippe, welcome. I'd like for us to start maybe with some definitions and some background. And what is it that you mean exactly when you say social Europe? What does that entail?
Oh, yeah. Okay, it's right. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for being here. I noticed that the average age of the audience is lower than at any of the other sessions I've attended. Very good, because I want you to invite you to join me in being opportunistic utopian. We must be utopian, but opportunistic, and we'll have an opportunity to clarify that through examples. So, social Europe, you can understand that in two ways. And one is a very broad way, when we say that there is something very special about Europe compared to the United States, and that is the European social model. And so you can understand social Europe as being the existence in all our member states, the member states of the European Union, of some sort of welfare state. It differs from country to country in terms of structure, in terms of size, also in terms of generosity, but on the whole, the welfare state is much stronger in European countries than it is in the United States. That's the broad sense. But you can also understand social Europe in a narrower sense, in the sense of social policy or a welfare state at the level of the European Union itself, organized not by the member states, but at the level of the Union. And there is, just to add that, and that was also the start of the contribution on which I circulated before, including to Stefanos. There is a famous claim by one of the founding fathers of neoliberalism, what's called neoliberalism, which is the defense of a far greater role for the market, which has been prevailing in North America, in Europe, since the Reagan-Thatcher period. And one of the founding fathers is someone called Friedrich Hayek. And Friedrich Hayek's thesis was that if you have something like a European Union, the welfare state will collapse. And he thought that was good if it were to collapse, because that means less regulation, less redistribution. And he thought so because of a combination of two reasons, and one of them will be relevant for the rest of our conversation in connection with the war. One is when you have a common market, free circulation, easy circulation of workers, of capital, of goods, of services. It's very difficult for one country, Greece, Portugal, Bulgaria, whatever, to have a generous welfare state at that level, because if you have it at that level, you have to tax a lot, and then businesses go elsewhere, or the rich people go elsewhere. So if you have something like a European Union with a single market, very significant, then you can no longer have a generous welfare state in each nation. But then you could say, well, let's have it at the level of the Union. And he says, no, 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 that won't work. Because the reason why it worked at the national level is that people had a common identity. They had a feeling of solidarity. If a Greek person is in trouble, another Greek person feels a responsibility to help that Greek person. And the stronger the feeling of belonging to a nation is, the stronger, the more generous the solidarity can be. And he says something, can you imagine that a clerk in the city of London, someone working in the city of London, would agree to be taxed more or to pay more for his goods in order to help a French farmer or a Belgian worker? Besides, that won't help. And so that's at the core of this discussion about social Europe, which is it possible then? Can we save our national welfare states? Should we build a welfare state at the level of the Union? And so does social Europe, in the broad sense I meant, the existence of welfare state, does it need today to take the form of social Europe in the second sense, in the sense of a welfare state at the level of the European Union?
So Philippe, exactly on that point, Europe, I mean, for the first time we have a major war happening in Europe. The EU is under attack from a lot of different actors around the world, including also potentially the current US administration. How do you see then, I mean, talking about the identity aspect and the identity issues that Europe have, is war a good thing for the creation of a social Europe, exactly because it can create a stronger European identity, or is it a bad thing because it's taking away funds that could be used for the creation of a stronger social Europe in the narrow sense?
Yeah. Well, there is this interesting book published about 15 years ago by an American political scientist who tries to find out why some confederations of states could become federal states and then start organizing themselves democratically, and then possibly also have some sort of social policy. And he says there are some examples that failed in Scandinavia, in South America, but there are examples that succeeded, namely in Switzerland and the United States. And why did they succeed? And he says because of the combination of two things. One is that they were at war with an enemy. In the case of the United States, it was against England. And that's one condition. And there was no big protector to help them. And he said 15 years ago, but I can't see that happening for the European Union, because war is not in sight. And plus you have NATO with the big brother, the United States, that will protect Europe. Because now we are exactly in that situation, which he said, because what he just said, that was not the situation of Europe. He said that's good for the world, but it's bad for European unification. But now we are in that situation. And so the question is this then this incredible moment in which the various European countries will manage to come together to form something like United States of Europe? Of course, not quite the same, because we have our linguistic, cultural differences. It will never be the same, but it will be more like the United States than the European Union has ever been, and because of this pressure. Now, is this happening? And there have been several sessions at this forum that are relevant to the topics. Of course, one of the difficulties is that the war itself is perceived as a threat to very different extents by different countries. And in fact, Ivan Krastev, a Bulgarian thinker, very interesting, mentioned at a session this morning that it was striking that really there are member states of the European Union that were part of the Russian Empire, not the Soviet Union was wide, of the Russian Empire. And those are the countries that push for going into war, and that means Finland, Estonia, the three Baltic states, and they are those that feel most threatened and find it most important to help Ukraine. But if you are far away, even in Greece, despite the religious connection with Ukraine, and if you are in Portugal, I mean, all this is far more remote. And so one difficulty for this to happen is that the heterogeneity in terms of history, but also in terms of geopolitical situation. Moreover, we realized that it would have made more sense, in particular, than to start having a common army in order to fight that and thereby to unify, at the United Kingdom still be part of the European Union, because in terms of military force, they are, together with France, but probably more than France, they are the strongest in military terms. But what you see happening, and again, there were interesting British contributions at this forum about this issue, is that there is really a sort of coming closer together between the United Kingdom, who feel a bit abandoned by the United States. They always felt, well, we are not really European because we are closer to the United States. And when you asked the British population in surveys which country in the world you feel closest to, it was usually the United States, and conversely for American citizens. And Trump apparently is trying to break this rapprochement, this coming nearer together, by saying, well, European Union will have to pay 20%, United Kingdom only 11%. But nonetheless, as was pointed out so this morning, as one of the two of the sessions, in fact, there is this feeling that the UK, the British people, and us, we are Europe. And so, and that, of course, makes it more complicated as a result of Brexit. But certainly there's this feeling of togetherness and this feeling of us being attacked, But we may feel it's the Ukrainians who are getting attacked, and perhaps the Estonians, not us. But the more there's this feeling of we are Europeans, and the more you can have the one precondition for the appearance of something like social Europe.
Although, unfortunately, at the same time, we are seeing also, because of the rise of a stronger nativist America, you know, a stronger rise also in far-right nativist movements in Europe, along with the strengthening, probably stronger than ever before, sense of a European identity. But from the other perspective of the national nativist response, a very big part, which is intimately related to the welfare state, is migration, right? And with the big, claims, they're taking our jobs, they're taking our welfare payments, and they're not contributing. So, Philippe, how is migration and the expected even bigger migration waves, particularly from Africa, that's having a population explosion, what does this mean for social Europe in 10, 20, or 30 years down the line?
Because the rise of the extreme right, or the far right in Europe, has multiple causes. In a way, but I think certainly not Trump, because initially they might have seen Trump as a good example, but now that Trump is attacking Europe, suddenly he stops being a model, and so they feel their own nationalism. I mean, often, if you defend your nation, it's to defend it against other nations. And if you have someone who says, make America great again and forget about the rest of the world, it's all about our interests, this doesn't make you very attractive as a model for in other places. So, in a way...
despite the fact that they've been giving a platform to AfD and all the other right. Okay.
Yeah. So you can have Musk, who have had this interview with Weigel in Germany, and so this was an immediate support, perceived as support. But now the attack through the tariffs, etc., is really making all the far left, far right parties feeling very uneasy about this whole thing. But what are the two very important factors related to each other that behind the very general rise in the far right, in my view, one, the increased socio-economic security, and that's why it's very important to strengthen our welfare state so that the people feel more secure. Because the negative perception of the European Union among many people is that the European Union is doing a lot for industrialists, for mobile workers, high-skilled people who can move from one country to another, but it does very little for the people who are staying put where they are and when they feel threatened. They have their uncle lost a job in the next town because of competition coming from Bulgaria or from the Czech Republic, and the little town where they lived is no longer as it was before because of all these foreigners who settled there and with whom they can't even communicate. And so there is this feeling of insecurity, and that part of it, not all of it, is then so that's the socioeconomic security, but part of it is related to migration. And so, as I just illustrated, and there it's to some extent it's a threat to the socioeconomic security because competition by more dynamic workers coming from elsewhere, but part of it is also a threat to their cultural security, and cultural doesn't mean appreciation of nice ancient Greek literature and all that stuff, but it's living in an environment which is familiar to them, with the sort of shops to which they are used, the sort of restaurants to which they are used, rather than being surrounded by kebab restaurants and mosques and so on, and that's what they feel threatened by. And so therefore the central, maybe the defining feature of what it is to be far right is then the racism, the xenophobia that is associated to that, because some aspects of the far right make it very similar to the far left, and there's populist demands about protectionist to some extent, and so on. And that's not specific for the far right, but what's the defining feature and why there is often a cordon sanitaire, as it's called, so no other party wants to make an alliance with them, enter a government with them, is then related to that aspect of discrimination, xenophobia, racism, sometimes explicit. In Greece, you had a party that was banned for that reason. In Belgium, too, we had such a party that was banned and had to be reborn with more cosmetic efforts to make it acceptable.
Well, what I find this point of the far left and the far right looking very similar, at least in some of trade and economic policies, is fascinating and very interesting. One way in which they do seem to retain considerable difference, perhaps, is on their response to questions of climate change, adaptation, and sustainability. I think the wave of going against red tape, rethinking sustainability and what we have to do has shifted a lot in Europe as well. Just in the past few months with the new election results in the US, how does this big existential axe over our heads called climate change and climate crisis, how does that play into the creation of a social Europe?
Yeah, because on climate change and the things that need to be done in order to mitigate it, there is also some similarity between the far left and the far right. But for me, this climate change is such a more massive and sort of formidable challenge, far greater than a war, because it lasts for far longer, and it can only be addressed worldwide. And there is no point in us in Europe having a Green Deal and making making everyone pay more for energy, the industry, and as well as households. There's no point in doing that if the others keep drill, and just improve their competitiveness by using and misusing fossil fuels as much as now the US seems on the way to doing. So it's really a massive problem, very difficult to solve, because you can only solve it through cooperation worldwide, including with the largest country in the world, which is Russia. And so, despite the things that might be said about the war being good for European unification and therefore for building some sort of social Europe in the sense of some elements of a welfare state at the level of the European Union, despite that, war is an absolute calamity, because war with Russia today needs to be ended as soon as possible through some compromise that will not be a beautiful compromise. It will not be considered as just peace by either of the two sides. It needs to be, but hopefully the Trump administration won't mess it up through amateurish diplomacy, and but something like that needs to be done in order then gradually to rebuild trust, the trust that is required in order to have this worldwide cooperation. So that's why I'm really on the pacifist side on this issue. And so I think we shouldn't say, well, we'll help Ukraine up to the final victory, and when we'll send tanks to Moscow and we'll drag Putin to the International Court in The Hague. Rubbish. That will never happen. We need some sort of compromise that will also be face-saving for Putin. Of course, also must preserve the sovereignty of whatever will be left of Ukraine, the largest part of Ukraine. There will be a loss of territory, but this is what will be needed in order to end that war. And I find, and when you look again at the demography, you know, before the First World War, which was a European war, Europe was 25% of the population of the world, and it colonized half of the rest of the world. Now, Europe shrank to 9% of the population of the world. And we still managed to have this war between us, and so that's 9%, including Russia, that is making it difficult, if not impossible, to address a problem of climate change that will have terrible consequences for Asia, for Africa, and so we need to stop that as soon as possible, and then engage in the rebuilding of trust. And that's why also our thinking about the social Europe must integrate something else, which is the incredible imbalance, demographic imbalance between Europe and Africa. Because Europe is used to have a population more than double the population of Africa in 1950, middle of the 20th century. Now Africa is more than double the population of Europe. And by the end of this century, the forecast of the projection of the United Nations is that Europe will shrink by 100 million inhabitants, from 750 million to 650 million. And Africa will go up, will explode from 1.5 billion people today to nearly 4 billion people. So you can imagine the pressure on the Mediterranean. And so how can you handle that? And so that we must at the same time have a policy that tries to alleviate the pressure by helping the African population to develop and also to do their demographic transition, and so that will be very important. And now in order to increase the budget on defense, we decrease the budget on development aid and on climate alleviation. This is not exactly clever, given that threat and that challenge that is going to come. But at the same time, we must be prepared, including in a country like Greece, and perhaps especially in a country like Greece that is losing population, together with Ukraine. Yeah. These are the two countries in the world, Greece and Ukraine, that are losing, proportionally, that are losing most population. So in Europe, globally, we need to be able to accommodate more people coming from elsewhere, but especially from Africa, but in a way that doesn't make our own institutions crumble. So right. You need to open the door. It might still be something like a fortress, but with gates that are intelligently conceived, also with an ability to exploit and to make good use of the diasporas. And this is of crucial importance for our future, for social Europe, but more globally for the survival of our civilization.
So Philippe, we're getting close to time, and I'd like to make sure we talk about your godchild, the basic universal income. I think it might be good if you just gave us a very simple definition of what do we mean with UBI, and is UBI part of social Europe?
Okay, so UBI, as it's called, unconditional basic income, is the idea of giving to every member of the society an income, unconditionally, a modest income. But that is a floor rather than a safety net. Currently, we have a safety net, we have social assistance for the poor, and so on. But the big problem with the systems we have, more or less generous, is that it's only given to the poor. And first you have to try to find the poor. And so many of the real poor never get the money. And secondly, as soon as you get some sort of job, even part-time, badly paid, but it gets you out of then you are, say, fantastic, and your benefit is withdrawn. And so what we need today is something that is a real floor on which you can stand and which you can combine with training, with studying, with taking jobs, with starting some sort of business. That's what we need. And we need it in order to address a number of challenges. There's this challenge of providing a real security to everyone, but it's also the challenge of artificial intelligence, automation, robotization, etc. This is going to come. I don't believe at all something that Elon Musk occasionally says, we need a universal basic income because there won't be jobs for everyone, and so you need to give money to these people so that they don't starve, and above all, they don't protest and they don't come and try to get to kill the capitalists or whatever. No, what you need is this floor that is an essential complement to lifelong learning. This is not what we need, this combination of a firm floor and lifelong learning. The idea now has become far more popular than it was when I started thinking about it in the early 80s, long after most of you were, before most of you were born, and now it has become popular in many places in the world where I didn't expect that would ever become popular.
So this is the form social Europe can take?
And then at the level of social Europe, of course, most of social policy is organized at the national level, so most basic income proposals are made also at the local level. But I believe in something I've called a Euro dividend, which is a modest income that's funded by VAT. VAT is a tax that's already partly Europeanized, levied at the European level, and that would then provide a floor to be supplemented within each country by possibly a national basic income, etc. And it would serve many purposes, including, as in the Greek case, some sort of macroeconomic. It would be some sort of macroeconomic stabilizer between countries, essential for a safe survival of the euro. So it would have a number of other functions apart from the contribution to the socio-economic security of each European resident, not only citizen.
Great. I think we are 30 seconds away from closing, so I won't ask another question. I'm getting the glance. But thank you very much for explaining what social Europe is and can be. And I will definitely take home and start using the term opportunistic utopian. I want us all to leave with that in mind of how we can, in our own ways, be opportunistic utopians in our lives and in our communities and societies. So thank you, Philippe, for your time, and let's give him a warm applause.